The pen felt heavier than it should have. 12 grams, maybe less, but my hand wouldn't stop shaking around it. "Sign it or I'll drag this out for years," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "You're 71, Mom. You don't have years." Somewhere behind me, a glass of wine clinked against another in a toast I wasn't part of. I set the pen down on the granite counter. It made almost no sound at all. "Okay," I said. Nobody in that room understood what I meant by that word. "Not yet. My name is Eleanor Voss. I'm 71 years old, and for 38 years I ran a boutique architectural firm out of a converted warehouse in Tribeca. Voss and Lindqvist Design. Before I sold my stake for $9.2 million and retired the way I'd always planned to. Quietly, on my own terms. In a penthouse I designed myself. That penthouse, 4,100 square feet, wraparound terrace, 3 bedrooms, views of the Hudson from every window that mattered, was worth $5.5 million. I paid for it in cash. My son Marcus was 44. My daughter-in-law Priya was 41. Between them they'd never built anything I could point to. But they'd learned somewhere along the way that patience with an old woman could be its own kind of business plan. I want to tell you exactly how they tried to take it from me, and exactly how I made sure they never took anything from anyone again. It started on a Tuesday in March, the kind of gray afternoon where the light in my apartment turns the color of dishwater. I'd come home early from a doctor's appointment. Nothing serious, a hearing check, though I let people believe otherwise later, and that lie would matter more than I knew at the time. I heard voices before I got my key in the door. Marcus's voice and a second man's, low and unfamiliar. I didn't walk in. I stood in the hallway, coat still on, and listened. "She's got no idea what this place appraises for now," the unfamiliar voice said. "Market's up 11% since she bought it. We're talking 6.2, 6.3 easy. She thinks it's still worth what she paid," Marcus said, and I heard the smile in it, the specific smile he'd had since he was 11 years old and lying about broken things. "She doesn't check anything. Doesn't want to. That's the beauty of it." A woman laughed. "Priya. As long as she signs before she gets weird about it. Old people get weird about money right before they die. Suddenly everyone's a saint." I stood in that hallway for 11 more seconds. I counted them. Before I put my key in the door and called out, cheerfully, that I was home. Nobody in that room knew that my hearing, the thing I'd just gotten checked, was perfect. The unfamiliar voice belonged to a man named Rick Doyle, introduced to me a week later as a friend from Marcus's gym who does real estate on the side. I let Marcus walk him through my own living room like he owned it, gesturing at my terrace doors, my herringbone floors, the fireplace I'd argued with 3 contractors to get exactly right. That night, I called an appraiser I actually trusted, a woman named Coretta Byrne who'd valued 3 buildings I'd designed. I asked her quietly what my unit was worth. $6.35 million current market, she said. Rick Doyle's whispered number in my hallway had been dead accurate, which meant this wasn't a guess. It was research. Someone had already been doing homework on my home. I started opening my own mail before Marcus could help me with it, which had become his habit twice a month, ever since I'd had a minor fall the previous autumn. In a folder he'd left on my kitchen counter, labeled almost mockingly, house stuff, I found a draft quitclaim deed. My name. His name. A transfer for estate planning purposes. No dollar figure listed anywhere on it. I photographed every page with my phone before he came back for the folder. I said nothing. I asked him about it over dinner gently, the way you'd ask a child about a broken vase you already knew he'd broken. "Marcus, what's a quitclaim deed for the apartment?" He didn't even blink. "Mom, it's just protective structuring. If anything happens to you, this avoids probate, avoids estate tax exposure, keeps the whole thing out of court. Every estate attorney recommends it for people your age. It's not a transfer, it's a shield." It was of course exactly a transfer. But I nodded, the way I'd learned to nod at contractors who lied to me for 20 years about concrete cure times. "That sounds smart," I said. "Let me think about it." 2 weeks later, I came home unannounced again. I'd learned by then that unannounced was the only version of me that told me anything true. Priya was on the phone with her sister, feet up on my ottoman, a glass of my Sancerre in her hand. She's basically already agreed to it, Priya said, laughing. God. She's so easy once you make her feel included. We tell her it's for taxes, she just goes along with it. Once it's signed, we list it before Memorial Day. Rick says 6-3 if we stage it right. I already picked the listing agent. I stood in my own doorway and smiled at nothing. The last discovery was the one that changed the shape of everything. I asked my attorney Daniel Farrow, a man I trusted since 1998, to quietly pull whatever paperwork existed anywhere with my name attached. He called me back 4 days later, and for the first time in 26 years, his voice had an edge in it. Eleanor, he said, there's a power of attorney filed. Notarized 6 weeks ago. Your signature's on it. I had never signed a power of attorney in my life. I decided that night, sitting alone at my kitchen island with the lights off, to become someone I wasn't. I started repeating myself at dinner, asking the same question about the weather twice within 10 minutes. I let my hand tremble slightly when I poured tea, just enough to rattle the cup against the saucer. I bought a cane I didn't need and let it lean conspicuously against my chair by the door. The reasoning was simple, and I turned it over in my mind like a stone I was polishing. Predators don't slow down for prey that looks strong. They get careless. They get loud. And loud people leave evidence. If Marcus and Priya believed I was fading, they wouldn't just relax, they'd accelerate. They'd stop being careful about what they said in front of me, and they'd stop being careful about what they put in writing. So I played frail. I let Priya repeat instructions to me like I was slow. I let Marcus start signing my name to small things, just to save me the trouble. A delivery slip, a doorman tip envelope. And I let each one become a small, harmless sample of forgery I quietly had notarized copies made of, through a document examiner named Louis Okafor whom Daniel Farrow recommended. Then I built the trap. I told Marcus over a lunch I insisted on paying for, that I was finally ready to sign the paperwork, but that I wanted to do it properly with everyone present at a small family dinner, so it feels like a decision, not a chore. I could see the relief crack open across his face like sun through blinds. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd had a small recording device installed in the light fixture above my dining table 2 days earlier, by a security consultant Daniel had vetted personally, a quiet man named Theo Marsh who'd done sweeps for 2 Fortune 500 boards. I also had a second recorder, my phone set to voice memo, sitting in my cardigan pocket, buzzing faintly against my hip every time it hit a new file segment, a small vibration only I would ever notice. I invited Daniel Farrow to the dinner too, introduced simply as an old friend from the building committee. Marcus didn't ask more than that. Marcus never asked more than the minimum required to get what he wanted. The night of the dinner, I wore my grandmother's pearl brooch, the one I always wore to things that mattered, though nobody in that family had ever noticed it before, which tells you something about how closely they were actually looking at me. Priya arrived in a cream silk dress that cost more than my monthly building fees, sipping a martini before she'd even taken her coat off. Marcus brought the paperwork in a leather folio, sliding it toward my spot at the table before the appetizers had even landed. "We really appreciate you making this easy, Mom," he said, pouring himself wine. "Some families, this kind of thing tears them apart. We're lucky you're being reasonable." "I try to be reasonable," I said. Priya laughed, a little too loud, a little too early into her second martini. "Honestly, it's kind of sweet. You signing this yourself, I mean. After everything." She glanced at Marcus. "Better than last time, right?" Marcus shot her a look. She didn't notice. My phone buzzed once gently against my hip. "What do you mean last time?" I asked, voice soft, cup rattling faintly against its saucer as I lifted it. "Nothing," Marcus said quickly. "She means nothing." "I signed something before?" I asked, letting my eyes go a little unfocused, a little lost, the performance I'd rehearsed alone in my bathroom mirror for 2 weeks. Priya, 3 drinks deep now, leaned forward like she was sharing a delicious secret. "The power of attorney, silly. You really don't remember? You were having one of your fuzzy days. Marcus just helped you sign it. For your own good." The table went quiet. Daniel Farrow set down his fork. I never signed a power of attorney, I said. My voice did not rise. It never rises. Power, I found, lives in the register just above a whisper. Marcus's face went the color of the tablecloth. Mom, don't be dramatic, we can explain. You forged my signature, I said, on a legal document notarized 6 weeks ago that gave you control over a $5.5 million asset. And tonight you brought a quitclaim deed to this table with no purchase price listed, expecting me to sign my home away in front of witnesses you assumed were too polite to ask questions. I reached into my cardigan pocket and set my phone on the table, screen up, the voice memo app still running, timestamp climbing in real time. Daniel, I said, would you mind reading Mr. Doyle's projected listing price into the record? I believe you have his text messages to my son. Daniel Farrow, who was not a building committee friend at all but the attorney who'd spent 6 weeks quietly building a case file thick enough to choke a courtroom, opened his own folder and began to read, calmly, factually, in the exact tone you'd use to read a grocery list, because facts delivered flatly land harder than any shout ever could. Priya's glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the hardwood, wine spreading across the floor like something finally visibly breaking open. 2 men in plain clothes who had been waiting at my request in the lobby of my building stepped into the dining room precisely on schedule, a detective from the Diaz Elder Financial Abuse Unit and a subpoena server, both of whom Daniel had coordinated with in advance, both of whom had been listening to the last 20 minutes from a car parked outside. I picked up the quitclaim deed from the table, the one with no price on it, and tore it once cleanly down the middle. I've spent 38 years signing documents that meant something, I said. This one didn't. Marcus was charged with forgery in the 2nd degree and attempted grand larceny under New York penal law, facing exposure that could run him several years depending on how the DA chose to proceed. He lost his consulting job within 11 days once his employer saw the story circulating. Priya was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the early filings, and was dropped by 2 of her 3 closest friends within a month. Friends who'd heard the recording Daniel submitted into evidence and simply stopped returning her calls. Rick Doyle lost his real estate license pending investigation, and was quietly let go from the brokerage that had never actually vetted him. I made one exception to the wreckage. Marcus's 26-year-old daughter, my granddaughter Sophie, had known nothing. She'd been in Boston finishing a master's degree the entire time. I paid off the remaining $34,000 of her student loans anonymously through Daniel's office, no note attached, because punishing the innocent for the sins of the guilty was never the plan, and it never should be anyone's plan. 8 weeks later, on a night with sleet coming down sideways off the Hudson, my doorman called up to say Marcus was in the lobby. No coat. No umbrella. He'd lost the apartment Priya's family had been subsidizing, lost the case, lost most of what he thought he was owed by simply existing as my son. I met him at my own door instead of letting him up further. Mom, he said, soaked through, please. I have nowhere else. I looked at him for a long moment. You had everything, Marcus. You just wanted more than what you had. I closed the door. My husband, Walter, who had stood beside me through every deposition, every subpoena, every sleepless night that spring, put his hand on my shoulder as the deadbolt clicked into place. You did the right thing, he said. I know, I said. That's the part that surprises me most. Here's what I learned, and I'll say it to you plainly. Love is not the same thing as access, and the people who deserve your trust never need to manufacture your confusion to get it. If someone in your life is only kind to you when they think you're not paying attention, believe the version of them you overheard, not the version they perform for you. Has anyone in your family ever underestimated you the same way? Tell me what happened in the comments. I read every one. And if this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe for the next one, and I'll see you there.